If a single conflict erupts in the wrong place, global trade does not slow down gradually. It fractures almost instantly, sending shockwaves through every major economy within days. Because the modern world runs on tightly optimized shipping routes, even a small disruption at a critical choke point can cascade into a full-scale breakdown of supply chains worldwide. Most people imagine global trade as vast and flexible, with ships moving freely across oceans, but in reality, it is funneled through a handful of narrow corridors that cannot be easily replaced. These corridors, known as choke points, act like bottlenecks in a system built for efficiency, meaning any disruption forces delays, rerouting, and escalating costs almost immediately. And when military tension rises in regions like Taiwan or the Strait of Hormuz, the risk is not just local conflict. It is a systemic shock to the entire global economy. Because what appears as a regional war can rapidly evolve into a global supply crisis. As shipping routes become unsafe, insurers withdraw coverage, and vessels begin avoiding entire regions. Global trade today depends on a fragile network of maritime routes, where over 80% of goods move by sea, linking factories, ports, and consumers across continents. This system works because it is predictable and continuous, but that same predictability becomes a weakness when a key route is suddenly disrupted by conflict or blockade. For decades, globalization has pushed companies to reduce costs by concentrating production and minimizing inventory, making supply chains faster but far less resilient to shocks. As a result, disruptions that once took months to spread can now impact global markets within days, amplifying the consequences of even limited regional conflicts. One of the most critical choke points sits in the Strait of Hormuz, where a large portion of the world's oil supply passes through a narrow stretch of water each day. If conflict escalates in this region, even without a full blockade, the threat alone can cause shipping insurers to spike premiums, forcing tankers to reroute or halt operations. This leads directly to rise in oil prices, which then feed into transportation costs, manufacturing expenses, and ultimately higher prices for consumers around the world. A similar vulnerability exists in the South China Sea, where trillions of dollars in trade pass annually through waters contested by multiple nations with overlapping claims. If tensions here escalate into military confrontation, commercial vessels may be forced to avoid the region entirely, adding weeks to shipping routes and increasing fuel costs dramatically. The Taiwan Strait represents an even more critical risk, not just because of its shipping lanes, but because of its role in global semiconductor production. Taiwan produces a significant portion of the world's advanced chips, and any disruption to its exports would ripple through industries from automotive to consumer electronics. Even a temporary shutdown could halt production lines globally, as modern manufacturing depends on a steady flow of highly specialized components with few substitutes. This creates a scenario where a regional conflict does not remain contained, but instead spreads through economic systems, disrupting production far beyond the battlefield. Unlike past wars, where economies were more localized, today's interconnected system ensures that shocks are transmitted rapidly across borders and industries. Shipping companies respond first by rerouting vessels, but alternative routes are often longer, more expensive, and already operating near capacity under normal conditions. This means delays begin to stack, ports become congested, and delivery schedules collapse, creating a domino effect across supply chains that depend on precise timing. At the same time, insurers may classify affected regions as high-risk zones, making it financially unviable for ships to enter without significantly higher costs. These added costs are not absorbed by shipping companies alone. They are passed along through the supply chain, eventually reaching consumers as higher prices. Meanwhile, governments may impose export controls or stockpile critical resources, further tightening supply and amplifying shortages in global markets. Energy markets are often the first to react, because oil and gas flows are highly sensitive to geopolitical risk, and even perceived threats can trigger price spikes. As energy costs rise, industries that rely heavily on fuel, such as transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture, face immediate pressure on margins. This pressure translates into reduced output, layoffs, or price increases, depending on how businesses attempt to absorb or pass on the higher costs. Financial markets also react quickly, as investors move capital away from perceived risk zones, causing currency fluctuations and volatility in global markets. Emerging economies tend to suffer the most, as they rely heavily on imported energy and stable trade flows to sustain growth and manage inflation. At the same time, advanced economies are not immune, as the reliance on global supply chains means disruptions can stall production and reduce economic output. One overlooked consequence is the impact on food supply, as many countries depend on imported grains, fertilizers, and agricultural inputs transported through these routes. If shipping is disrupted, food prices can rise rapidly, increasing the risk of social unrest in regions already vulnerable to economic pressure. In parallel, manufacturing hubs face shortages of raw materials and components, forcing factories to slow down or shut operations temporarily. This creates a feedback loop where reduced production leads to lower supply, which then drives prices even higher across multiple sectors. Retail industries feel the impact as well, as delayed shipments lead to empty shelves, reduced inventory, and missed sales opportunities during peak demand periods. Consumers experience this not as a distant geopolitical issue, but as rising prices, limited availability, and declining purchasing power. At a strategic level, governments may respond by increasing military presence or forming alliances to secure trade routes, raising the risk of further escalation. This militarization of trade corridors transforms economic choke points into potential flashpoints, where miscalculation can trigger broader conflict. Meanwhile, companies begin reassessing supply chains, considering diversification or relocation, but such shifts take years and require significant investment. In the short term, there are few quick solutions, meaning economies must absorb the shock while attempting to stabilize critical sectors. Shipping delays also affect industries dependent on just-in-time logistics, where even small disruptions can halt entire production systems. Automotive manufacturing is a prime example, where a single missing component can stop assembly lines across multiple countries. Technology industries face similar risks, as complex products depend on components sourced from multiple regions, each vulnerable to disruption. The longer a conflict persists, the more structural the damage becomes, as temporary delays evolve into long-term supply shortages and market imbalances. Over time, inflationary pressure builds, as higher costs become embedded across the economy, reducing real incomes and slowing economic growth. Central banks may respond by adjusting interest rates, but this introduces another layer of complexity, as tightening policy can further slow economic activity. At the same time, governments may increase spending to stabilize critical sectors, adding fiscal pressure and potentially increasing debt levels. These combined effects create a challenging environment where policymakers must balance inflation, growth, and stability under uncertain conditions. Historical examples show that even limited disruptions can have outsized effects, particularly when they occur at critical nodes in global trade networks. The difference today is the scale and speed of interconnection, which amplifies the impact and reduces the time available to respond effectively. As supply chains become more complex, the margin for error shrinks, making the system more efficient but also more fragile under stress. This fragility is what makes modern trade vulnerable, not just to large-scale wars, but to targeted disruptions at key points in the network. In this environment, resilience becomes as important as efficiency, yet building resilience requires time, investment, and strategic coordination. For now, the global system remains heavily dependent on these choke points, with limited redundancy to absorb major shocks. This means that the next conflict in a critical region will not be just a regional issue, but a global economic event with far-reaching consequences. Understanding these risks is essential, because the stability of global trade underpins everything from economic growth to everyday living standards. As tensions rise in multiple regions simultaneously, the probability of disruption increases, even if no single conflict escalates fully. The real danger lies in convergence, where multiple pressures combine to strain the system beyond its capacity to adapt quickly. And when that threshold is crossed, the effects are not gradual. They are sudden, widespread, and difficult to contain once they begin. The question is not whether global trade can be disrupted, but how severe the next disruption will be when it finally occurs. Because in a system this interconnected, the cost of instability is shared globally, regardless of where the conflict begins. If you want to understand the future of the global economy, you have to watch these choke points, because they are where local tensions become global crises. And if you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to Global Power Brief, because the next disruption may already be closer than it seems.